In August of 2005, 5 youthful grown-ups chose to investigate a semi-secret submerged cave in favor of Y Mountain in Provo, Utah, nicknamed the Cavern of Death. They had no clue about the lethal risk holding up inside. In the end, only one of them would return. This is the deadly breakdown of the Gollum Cave. Misfortune on Wednesday, August 17th, a gathering of 5 companions went out for supper, and they wound up examining a mystery cave in favor of Y Mountain. This mountain is close to the BYU grounds. Such countless neighborhood understudies knew about the cavern's presence. 2 youthful cavers had completely studied Gollum's cavern. Simply a year prior to it, doesn't appear to be entirely cordial from the get-go, since it's shrouded in a foot of water and is just 4 feet tall. It requires the people who enter to hunker down to stroll along the almost 100-foot entrance burrow in a shallow stream. For most climbers, this wouldn't be really smart yet. For the people who have some familiarity with the mystery cave, inside the test could be charming. The mystery. A piece of this sinkhole expects you to bring down yourself through a 18 by 24-inch water-filled opening in the ground in any event. For those that understand what lies on the opposite side, this overwhelming second can stop even the boldest travelers that evening. The gathering chose to test themselves in this dim and excluding cave. It was at that point, 2 a.m., when they arrived at the cavern region. They invested some energy sitting outside before they wandered into the shallow cavern. Jennifer Gilbraith had to deal with the watery passage previously, so she had consoled the others that they would have the option to pause their breathing and swim the 15 feet to the next cave inside, notwithstanding becoming hypothermic and dropping. During her past experience, she was as yet eager to show her companions this mystery place. Blake Donner, Scott McDonald, and aerial vocalist all consented to check it out. A 5th companion, Joseph Ferguson, chose to stand by outside the principal cave until they got back with just a solitary electric lamp. The 4 advanced toward the little opening in the floor of the cavern. It was presently 4:30 a.m. and completely dark. External, each in turn they summoned the nerve to bring down themselves into the limited section loaded up with cold water. Jennifer went first, since she was the one in particular who had been there before they watched her head vanish under the water, and a little wave when she traveled through to the opposite end. The water-filled burrow was no greater than a fridge entryway, only 2 feet wide and 4 feet high. Individually, Blake, Scott, and Ariel each dropped in and pursued the course that Jennifer had demonstrated. There was a rope that was joined to a stone in the fundamental cavern. It drove through the submerged burrow and was attached to a piece of wood in the inward cavern. With such a little passage space, a rope wasn't presumably viewed as important to lead back to the entry opening, apparently as though you were unable to miss it, sadly. That isn't the case. Brian Lamprey. A past caver expressed that, on his return, he overshot the leave opening and hit a stopping point around 4 feet past the opening. In a wild-eyed second, he understood that a mass of rock encompassed him. He frantically pushed, in reverse, getting a handle on at the roof until he came to the opening. The additional time that this took made him sure that this would end in death. He was very fortunate to find the opening simply a brief moment before he panted in a lung brimming with water. On this day, every one of the 4 had made the short swim to the little cavern only 15 feet away. There was space for them to stand and move around somewhat. The cavern was essentially 6.5 feet tall, with a top in the middle around 9 feet. This left around 3 feet of airspace over the water. Joseph sat sitting tight for his companions to return. He wasn't precisely certain the way that long they wanted to remain in the cavern. No unmistakable arrangement had been laid out, so he just held up. After almost an hour, he strolled into the cavern and took a gander at the watery opening. Yet there was no indication of the spotlight or development of the gathering. It was currently 5:30, and he didn't know what to do. He called a couple of companions who knew all about the cavern, and afterward, in the end, the police at 6:25, a.m., the point at which they swam into the inward cavern. They were presumably apprehensive and exhausted, with hearts hustling with adrenaline when their countenances got away from the water. They would have taken a full breath of help. Sadly, the air in this little space was reasonable, terrible air in buckling. This term alludes to any air that isn't made out of the ordinary, 21 oxygen and 79 basically nitrogen, with a couple of different gases at additional irrelevant rates. Since this cavern was stale and the water source was shut, the carbon dioxide development would be possible because of a few causes. Gradually, as guests invested energy in the inward chamber, the oxygen would be drained and carbon dioxide would fabricate. Carbon dioxide is likewise known to develop in limestone caves because of disintegration and drainage from plant rot. There was additionally proof that candles were left consuming inside, which would have diminished the accessible oxygen. Having no wind stream, carbon dioxide would have settled to a higher fixation at the water level. It would be an unpretentious advancement over the long run, and the companions visiting the mystery cavern would have known next to nothing about the cool in the inward chamber. Regardless of whether the cavers had just remained for only a couple of moments, their lessened ability to think, move, and inhale would make the return swim a hazardous undertaking. Once they were in this cavern, they might have, in short order, comprehended that they couldn't inhale well and that they ought to return quickly, on the grounds that the entry opening was so little, only each individual in turn could cross the limited passage and pull themselves up the leave opening. Jennifer left first, however, couldn't find the leave opening prior to running. Exhausted, she probably had a reduced limit. With regards to breath-holding and decisive reasoning, if the oxygen level was close to 10 to 12% in the cavern, she would have just had 60 seconds of breath-holding before she would drop on the off chance that the rope wasn't in her grasp. Then finding the opening would have been a hysterical exertion of feeling along the roof of the passage in the cavern. The other three could never have realized that Jennifer was in a battle for her life. They were left in obscurity, choking out quality of the inward cavern, subsequent to counting for 30 or 60 seconds. Ariel would have been close to leave the mystery cave in a carbon dioxide level of only 2 or 3%. Her breath rate would have multiplied. She would have been attempting to take full breaths prior to sliding her face under the water, rapidly swimming forward with her last explosion of energy. She came to a head to find the initial. It would have been totally unbelievable to feel the body of your companion in this restricted, dim passage. It should be a reasonable section, since there simply wasn't space for two individuals to push their heads through the tight opening. In a snapshot of frenzy, Ariel would have been frantic to get air, and perhaps not very understand that her companion was oblivious and positively near death. Right now, Blake and Scott would have been breathing the terrible air for a few additional minutes in obscurity. They each would have been feeling the impacts of lower oxygen, higher carbon dioxide, and the frenzy related with such an awkward climate to inhale. In the wake of holding up a brief time frame, the following companion entered the tight water-filled burrow. Currently in a lessened state, Blake would be anxious to push through this swim as fast as conceivable. He would have been so frightened to experience the two young ladies actually drifting in the water before him. The moment caution would leave you confounded about what direction to head. The opening ought to be simply before the individual before you. He might have understood that Ariel wasn't moving, and he expected to push her towards the opening to save her, in a passage that was just 2 feet wide and 4 feet pushing past. Anybody, or pushing them ahead, would be almost unthinkable, the last caver holding up. In obscurity, internal cavern alone would have been. Experiencing the longest, he was most likely anxious to escape this spot. Everlastingly, his excursion through the passage would be held back when he experienced his companions in such a lacking state. He might have fallen oblivious rapidly once the specialists showed up. It was no straightforward undertaking to attempt to safeguard the companions who may be caught in the internal cavern. They promptly siphoned air into the cavern to endeavor to re-establish any drained oxygen levels simultaneously. They siphoned out a portion of the water to make an airspace inside the interfacing burrow, for Heros to enter when the water levels dropped a little. They found the group of Jennifer Galbraith drifting right inside the passage in the wake of siphoning. For 1 more hour, they found the other 3 companions, Ariel Blake and Scott, by and large looking towards the leave opening from the proof found at the scene, the data given by Joseph Ferguson. Post-mortems affirming suffocating as the reason for death and records from different voyagers who have battled in the passage, we can figure out what probably happened. It would be difficult to envision. 4 sound, youthful grown-ups suffocating on the off chance that there weren't a few issues with the air in a range of only 15 feet. 4 companions suffocated. They were strong youngsters somewhere in the range of 18 and 28 years of age in the prime of their lives after the recuperation of their bodies. The cavern entrance was loaded up with cement to keep cavers from entering and conceivably losing more lives.